The Legend of Zelda's got a ton of cut characters from across the series. Sometimes it's a familiar enemy or NPC that showed up in an older game, but got quietly dropped from a later one, and other times it's way weirder. Fully made characters that were planned, modeled, and then basically erased like they never existed at all. In the code of Zelda's first 3D outing lies an unused character fans nicknamed Arya. Visually, she's a young Highland girl in a simple green outfit. Seen only in one 1997 Nintendo Power screenshot where she stands by a lake house talking to Link. With no fairy partner and a unique model, Arya appears to have been a guide-like NPC in early builds, possibly offering tips or side quests, before being dropped during development. She was likely cut as the game's scope and story shifted. Navi the fairy took over the guide role, and Arya's planned quest was abandoned. It is fascinating because her fully modeled figure, which is in the code as object_human 0x0006, remains hidden on the cartridge, and that's just evidence of a character we never got to meet in Hyrule. Staying with Ocarina of Time, Fado is actually present as a Kokiri girl, but evidence suggests that she was originally meant for a much bigger role. Early screenshots show Fado with a distinctive look perched on the Kokiri shop roof, which would be later occupied by a generic Kokiri. Intriguingly, Ocarina's code contains remnants of a scrapped Wind Temple and Wind Medallion, which were later reworked into the Forest Temple and Medallion. Fans theorize that Fado was initially the Wind Sage for that temple, explaining her unique model and eerie fascination with the Lost Woods. During development, the Wind element was dropped, Arya took over as Forest Sage, and Fado's role shrank to a minor NPC. Why was that cut? Possibly to streamline the Sage storyline and because the Wind Temple's concept was abandoned. It's interesting because this lost destiny was later recycled in Wind Waker. There was a sage named Fado who was a Kokiri boy who fulfilled the sage role. And this is just a neat example of how Zelda development sometimes repurposes scrapped ideas and uses them in future titles. Believe it or not, A Link to the Past began as a very different concept. In a 1989 interview, Shigeru Miyamoto revealed he envisioned the third Zelda game as a party-based adventure. Alongside Link, there would be a magic user and a girl who looked like a little fairy, and whose role consisted of reconnaissance. This fairy-like girl would scout ahead and report back, rather like a JRPG party member or an early Navi. Ultimately, Nintendo dropped the idea when A Link to the Past shifted back to a solo hero design, so this unnamed fairy companion never made it in. And why was this cut? Likely the complexity of managing multiple characters in an action Zelda proved just unwieldy, and Miyamoto reverted to the classic lone hero formula to keep things simple. Majora's Mask famously revolves around transformation masks for Deku, Goron, and Zora forms of Link. However, concept art in Hyrule Historia reveals that an adult Link mask was planned as well. This mask would have let young Link briefly assume his grown-up form, effectively allowing players to play as adult Link again in Termina. Early game code even contained an adult Link object and a mask texture resembling Link's face, and it was likely just cut due to time constraints and design focus. The developers opted to replace the idea with a fierce deity mask, and that just gave Link a powerful adult-like deity form only in boss fights. The adult Link mask may have been deemed redundant or just too hard to integrate into Termina's story, since an adult hero roaming around Clocktown would alter many interactions. It's interesting because it showed Nintendo considered a fourth transformation, one that would directly reference Ocarina of Time's dual age gameplay. Ultimately, we never got to see regular adult Link in this game, but I don't think anyone was disappointed by that because the fierce deity mask was a brand new idea here that was a lot cooler. Before I continue, I just want to say if you're enjoying this video, be sure to subscribe. It's going to be a lot more interesting characters such as Link's family members, and a secret boss that we never actually saw. There was a lot of scrapped ideas from Twilight Princess, and one of these is the Armos Titan. It's an oversized Armos statue enemy. Imagine the traditional Zelda Armos, those living statues you probably recognize, but supersized, humanoid, with a big green jewel on its chest as a weak spot. The Armos Titan was fully modeled and even partially functional. In fact, if you spawn it via cheats, it behaves like a normal Armos. Storm it until Link comes close, then it lumbers after him swinging its massive arms. Arrows to the chest would theoretically take it down, and it doesn't actually harm Link in the final code. It's likely because of unfinished damage scripting, so it may have been cut late in development when polishing enemy behaviors. Twilight Princess's dungeons already had plenty of big foes like the Darknuts, and this giant didn't really fit into any area. One theory is that it was an Armos Knight concept for the Temple of Time or Palace of Twilight that got dropped. It's interesting because the Armos Titan was never reused in any later title. It remains a one-off idea that we've just never seen in a Zelda game. And then staying on the topic of Twilight Princess, do you remember the Shadow Beast that dragged Link into the Twilight? Well, they had an earlier incarnation. And the GDC 2005 trailer, fans spotted a different looking shadow creature attacking Link in Faron Woods. The unused enemy, sometimes called the Shadow Beta, is still present in Twilight Princess's code, labeled as a Shadow Emissary variant. Visually, it's a large hulking figure, similar in shape to the final Shadow Beast, but with some differences in proportions and texturing. In the trailer, Link strikes it down in a forest, suggesting that originally these creatures appeared in daylight areas too. The final game Shadow Beasts were redesigned to be slimmer and only appear in twilight-covered regions. The beta version likely was cut as the art style evolved, and the devs opted for the more alien, shrieking design we know. We rarely get to see mid-development enemy design changes, but this was a perfect example of us getting to see just that. Essentially, this game had two versions of its signature shadow monster, and one was scrapped late. Hidden in the Wind Waker's files is this strange model and texture combo of a head with glasses. There were really really isn't much to say about this one, and there isn't even footage that I can find, but I just thought that this would be interesting to show here. We know Link is a lone adventurer, but early Breath of the Wild concept art dared to give him a family. Unused illustrations revealed in the Japanese Masterworks art book show Link relaxing with an older man and a little girl, identified as his father and younger sister. This father is depicted as a knight of Hyrule, mentoring his son. This suggests Breath of the Wild's developers toyed with a storyline where we'd meet Link's family or see them in flashbacks. Ultimately, they scrapped this idea in the final game, and while Link's lineage is barely mentioned, and we know that his dad is a knight, we never actually see him. Now, we have seen Link's family members before in past games, so why was this cut? I think it was probably to just avoid complicating the narrative with family obligations. Like, there's already the focus on the champions and the royal family, and adding Link's personal family might have required extra cutscenes or distracted from the main plot. And who knows if this was even something that was considered to be in the game, or if it just exists solely as concept art. Like I mentioned, there was also concept art of Link's sister. In one piece, Link stands protectively in front of a small girl, implying a big brother role. And this does echo the Wind Waker, where Link's sister drives the story's opening. Perhaps Breath of the Wild considered a similar emotional hook. However, nothing of Link's sister appears in the final game, and she isn't even mentioned. It seems that she was cut out early in planning, likely for the same reasons as Link's father, but unlike with Link's father, where we at least get a mention of him, there's nothing of Link's sister here. Every hero has a mother, but in Link's case, she stays in the shadows. Ocarina establishes that baby Link's mother brought him to the Kokiri Forest during the Hyrulean Civil War, and was gravely wounded and then entrusted him to the Great Deku Tree before passing away. This tragic figure is never seen in game and only described by the Deku Tree sprout in a brief text after the Forest Temple, yet she's a character of legend herself. Early on, there were rumors and fan theories that Ocarina of Time might include a cutscene of this event, or at least an image of Link's mother. In reality, nothing beyond the sprout's dialogue and a mention in the manual made it in. So I don't know if I'd really count this as a cut character, but I did want to mention it, because this seemed to be a deliberate design choice, keeping Link's parents unnamed and unseen. There has been artwork before and a manga that has since depicted her, and it shows a Hylian woman in armor or royal attire carrying infant Link, but in the game she remains just an unused character that, at least in my research, I couldn't even find any early models of or anything, so this isn't a cut character in the traditional sense. Deep in Twilight Princess's code, fans unearthed a huge figure, an unused Goron boss often nicknamed the Goron Golem. This script enemy is essentially a giant creature made up of rolled up Gorons. They're just clumped together in this rocky golem. Early testing shows that in-game, several Gorons would wander aimlessly until Link approached, then fuse into this massive boss and attack. The model suggests a battle in Goron Mines, and that never happened. Likely, Goron Golem was an early idea for the Goron Mines boss or mini-boss before being replaced by Danguro, the Goron Guard, or Fyrus, who was the Twilight Igniter boss. It was cut perhaps because Nintendo opted for more thematically fitting bosses. Fyrus better fit the fire monster motif for the mines, or technical issues with multiple Gorons merging. I really like this idea, like this is something that's quite unique for the Zelda series, and it shows a lot of the experimentation during Twilight Princess's development. Though unfinished, the Golem's punches and Link's attacks phase through each other due to the lack of collision data, and the model and code remain in the final game files. I've talked a lot about Twilight Princess today, and that just shows how much cut content there was in this game. Skyward Sword is packed with some of the most expressive NPCs in the entire series, but one of its most detailed characters never actually made it into the game. According to design notes published in Hyrule Historia, Skyleft was originally meant to include an unnamed resident cleaner, a young man obsessively devoted to picking up trash. Visually, he was designed with a bowl cut meant to make him look youthful, a slender build, constantly swaying hips, and an exaggerated sense of grace. He carried multiple specialized pairs of tongs, one for each type of garbage, and his animations were described as delicate and artistic, with dramatic reactions if he encountered trash unexpectedly. The notes go deep. He's listed as 20 years old, sensitive by nature, and even his hands were carefully designed with explicit instructions that his pinky should not bend, to avoid leaning into stereotypes while still giving him soft, elegant movements. Despite having no confirmed name or role in the final story, developer Akiko Hirono stated that the team wanted to use him in a sub-event, possibly tied to cleaning mechanics, or an item like the Gust Bellows. Ultimately, the character was later removed in development for unknown reasons, though Hirono later suggested that elements of his personality were absorbed into other Skyleft residents, like Pipit's demeanor or Greba's actual cleaning role. It's a great example of Skyward Sword's development philosophy, where even characters who never appeared still had a lot of care put into them just because they probably had so many ideas for this game. Perhaps the strangest discovery in Majora's Mask 3D's code was an unused Ganondorf model tied to a fishing minigame. Yes, the King of Evil nearly had a cameo in Termina. It appears that Grezzo included Ganondorf possibly as a hallucination or bonus catch in the new fishing hole, but then decided against it. In the final game, Ganondorf is only referenced in passing. He never physically appears, so seeing evidence of him in the remake files was shocking. Why include him? Maybe as an Easter egg. Like, imagine just seeing Ganon or seeing a silhouette in the pond as a gag. Nintendo probably thought it would break immersion or confuse the lore if he was actually here. Termina is a world without Ganon, and popping him in even as a joke might have just felt off. And his model in Majora's Masquerade is fully updated, yet he still goes unused. So that possibly means that they did have serious consideration for adding him here, but ultimately decided against it. The Great Fairies in Ocarina of Time are famously flamboyant, but during development they had a completely different design. Crystalline winged fairy queens resembling elegant angelic beings. Early previews and concept art described great fairies with long white wings and a body seemingly made of crystal, a very stark contrast to the vine-clad laughing versions in the final game. Interestingly, this beta design shares more in common with the Wind Waker's Great Fairies. In Ocarina of Time's final code, the Great Fairies model is named in a way that suggests the same object was repurposed, meaning the devs altered the fairy's appearance late in development. I don't know why this was changed. It could have been due to technical limits. The polygon count for a detailed wing model might have been problematic on the N64, or perhaps Miyamoto just wanted a more unexpected style. And this didn't end up going to waste, because Wind Waker later implemented a similar crystalline fairy design, almost as if it was reviving Ocarina of Time's original design. Veterans might notice something odd about Twilight Princess. Traditional Moblins, who are those pig-like brutes, are completely absent. Instead, we got Moblins, who were the horn goblins. Originally, though, Moblins were planned, and an early trailer showed a Moblin charging Link with a huge spear. That scene never occurs in the game, and it appears Moblins were scrapped and conceptually replaced by King Bulbin's Green Horde. The Moblin design seen in footage was a throwback to earlier Zeldas, but Twilight Princess's team went with a new enemy race to freshen things up. According to later interviews, Ayanuma's team felt Moblins didn't fit the Twilight Realm's aesthetic, and Western audiences weren't as fond of Tingle or Moblin's quirky designs. Bulbins had a grittier, armored look suitable for Twilight Princess's tone. And think about it, at the time, Moblins had been series staples, and then they were just entirely swapped out. Like, this would be like Goombas being planned for a Mario game and then being swapped out, which kinda did happen in Super Mario World. We would see Moblins again in Skyward Sword and then Twilight Princess, both with vastly different designs, and I believe this is the only Zelda game to date that does not have the Moblin. One of the most exciting early trailers for Twilight Princess featured Link sprinting through a cave as a huge spider chased him on the ceiling. That spider was an early version of Gohma, who's a classic Zelda boss. In the GDC 2005 trailer, you can glimpse this arachnid pursuing Link in a dynamic action scene. However, in the final game, Gohma is nowhere to be found. There is a spider boss who's Armogohma, but this is a much smaller one-room fight in the Temple at Time. It turns out the entire chase sequence and boss concept were cut. The devs changed dungeon designs and perhaps found a spider tunnel chase didn't fit or was just too cumbersome on the hardware. They scaled back to the simpler Armogohma battle, and there have been remnants of this scene, because when Zelda was showed off as a tech demo on the Wii U, we saw Link fighting a giant spider enemy, so who knows, maybe that had something to do with it. And those are just some characters that were cut from Zelda games, or perhaps never even intended to be in a Zelda game. I just thought it would be interesting to show some of this off, and if you want to see more, if you know any of characters I may have forgotten in this video, be sure to let me know in the comments. I also might do this for some other series, so let me know if you'd want to see that too. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed, and also join my Discord. I'll see you next time.